So we are talking about control flow and collections tonight for for lecture number 2, class 2. So we're going to cover a lot of, real important basics. We're going to kind of just go right through it a little bit of time. And first I've got a couple announcements, and then we'll get into lecture. This is, classic class format, so no surprises. All right, so somebody asked me about coding along with the lecture recordings, and there's actually an intentional reasoning behind why I don't do that. And for one thing, I have to go kind of fast sometimes because we have so much content we have to get through, and it would be frustrating and distracting for you guys if you were trying to keep up with me in the moment, because I can't slow down real time as it passes, even though supposedly it's relative. That's another debate for another day. So what I will do is I will make sure for every class this unit that there is a starter code in the main branch with to-dos. And then there's a solution branch that actually has the finished stuff, so that if you want to, after class, you can go and pull up the recordings, and you can do it at your own pace, and you can code along starting with that starter code. Just use the to-dos. And the other reason is just because I want to be sensitive to the fact that not everybody has 2 monitors. And when we're doing this virtually, kind of the only way you can watch lecture and code along with lecture would be to have, a couple of different screens. So I remember it was hard enough doing it in person, back when I was a student at Launch Code before the pandemic. Anyway, yeah. So that's the deal. Just make sure you fork all branches. Don't just fork main when you fork this repo, because otherwise you won't get the solution branch. Okay, so as I mentioned last week, next week there is no class on Monday because of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And on Thursday you have a catch-up class, and you will have a guest speaker, Mike from the Launch Code Company team, who will be here to answer all of your burning questions about the apprenticeship program, how all that works with the companies where we place people after they graduate, and go through liftoff. The graded assignment number 1 deadline is Monday the 23rd. That's going to cover concepts from chapters 1 through 4, which is classes 1 through 3. So everything that we do today and on Thursday, that's the last of it that you'll need in order to finish graded assignment 1. Okay, so let's talk about this stuff. So I'm going to mix things up and do things in slightly different order than they are in your chapter, because I want to talk about the data structures first. And then I'm going to talk about conditionals and loops, and we'll kind of use them especially with loops, to like loop through everything. Okay, so collections, a data structure, as you already know, because we talked about this in Unit 1, is just a way to store multiple pieces of data, right? And in JavaScript, you primarily used arrays and objects. And you'll see lots of other terms out there for different languages. You might see lists or dictionaries, maps, tuples. Java uses the term collection in general to refer to its data structures, but there are multiple kinds. So we're going to look at 3 of them: the array list, and the HashMap. They all have slightly different purposes and behaviors. So let's get into array. Array is somewhat less flexible in Java than you are used to. So there's 2 primary differences between Java and JavaScript. For one thing, a Java array has to be all the same type. And that's makes sense, right? Because you have to declare the type up front. You have to say all of the elements that are part of this array are going to be of this type, just like you did with TypeScript, right? That kind of changed the game compared to JavaScript. And then the second thing is that Java arrays are a fixed size. You actually have to say, I want an array of this size. So if you have data where you don't know how many elements you're going to eventually have, an array is probably not your best bet, because it has to be declared up front. And you basically just can put brackets on the type. That's a syntax to declare the array. So you can see in this example here, I've got the int, with the brackets on it, string with brackets on it. And that's also similar to the way it was done with TypeScript. The difference is you just put it up at the very front of the line. And let's see, do I have another bullet point? I do not. on this one. Okay, so yeah, so and you can kind of see here, you know, these are the easiest ways to declare the an empty array, and like this you say a new int and then of size 10. So if you want to declare it just as an empty array, just make sure you put the size in there between the brackets and use that keyword new. And that will set you up, and then you can add things to it with bracket notation, as you see here. And I appear to have what is going on here? Okay, I think I have a duplicate slide. Okay, so initializing an array with values, we have, you know, you don't have to initialize it as an empty array. You can actually add the values. You just have to use curly braces to say what they are. And then you can get the size with .length. Now, you may remember from the last class that in Java, the length method for a string actually it's a method, so it has to have the parentheses on it. But with an array, you actually don't use the parentheses. So, you know, why they have to make it this confusing, I don't know, but there it is. So use parentheses when it's a string, do not use parentheses when it's an array. And then you can use this, the arrays class, and import it if you want to use things like the toString to print like a nice version of the array. Otherwise, it kind of gives you some gobbledygook. So I've got an example here of how you can do that. And it's here, but I can wait, let's go over and actually like work with this in the example here. Let me make sure this is big enough. Can you guys read this okay, or is it still a little too small? Is it okay? All right. Okay, so for collections, we're going to declare an empty array that can hold 20 integers. So we will say that it's an integer array. We'll give it a name and say, you know, some numbers. How's that? And then we're just going to say new int, and then we have to say how many. And of course, we said it was going to be 20. And that will take care of that. So then we can add some numbers to it. And we don't have to add all 20. Essentially, there are 20 placeholders. There's going to be, you know, indices 0 through 19, just sitting there and waiting to hold values. Otherwise, they're null. So we could say that we want, you know, some numbers at index 0 to be, you know, 2. And then I could like have a couple more of those, and maybe, you know, index 1, index 2. And give that, you know, 6, and this one's 11. And then this is where we can use this arrays class, and you'll notice that it's suggesting this to me as I type it in. So I'm going to hit the tab key, and then it automatically puts that import statement up at the top for me. Otherwise, you can import it manually. You know, you can type this in. But arrays will give me this toString method that works well for making this where I can pretty print it. And then I just give it the name of the array like this. And now I can actually print it. So I need to do that part. I should have done that first. Sorry, guys. And then there we go. So yes, so we're printing it. And then what we're printing is the stringified version of some numbers. So if I run this, and I think I need to run it from here. Yeah, so you can actually see how this is set up, right? We've got this whole array, and we've only assigned values to, and actually assigned them as 0. That's interesting. It only assigned the numbers as to the specific ones we gave it values for, but everything else is just sitting there as a placeholder. I think that probably, let's try something.
Yeah, is it because they're primitives and not objects? It has to have a value.
I think that it's because it's converting it. Okay, hold on.
Come in.
Let's try doing some numbers at index 10, let's say, and run it. Yeah, it gives us 0. Interesting. Okay, I'm gonna have to look into that because I never use arrays in Java. I use array lists, which we're going to talk about next. So I honestly do not remember what happens there. Okay, I'll have to get back to you on that. Or one of you can Google it and post it in the lecture questions channel, and then we will all benefit. Okay. So next we can do the same thing with an array that can hold 3 strings. So string array, and we'll call it, words, I guess. And because, I'm nothing if not creative. Okay. And we'll say that it can hold exactly 3 strings. Okay. And then I'm going to add some strings, and why don't I just add names? So we could do like, I think in my example, I had what? Oh yeah, JK Rowling. Yeah. Okay. So we could say, why don't we change this to author? And it doesn't really make sense to do it for, I'm gonna stop talking. Author and at index 0 equals J. And, we can do this a couple more times for 1 and 2, K Rowling. And then we can again use, no, let's set up the printing first. Okay, there we go. Arrays dot toString, and then give it author. And then let's print that. Yeah, and there we can see that we've got this array that has exactly 3 elements, and it's J, K, and Rowling, because we actually, assigned the values for all 3. So that's pretty much all there is to it. It has pros and cons, as you guys are going to discover as you work with things, but most likely you are going to end up using array list most of the time because this is more flexible. So let's talk about that. An array list does have to have elements that are all the same type. And it has to be specified using the wrapper class instead of the primitive. So you remember we talked last class about that whole idea of auto boxing, how you can have like an integer, capital I, instead of an int, right? This is how arrays have to be declared. So just keep that in mind. You're always going to use the wrapper class instead of the lowercase primitive class, or primitive, type is what I'm trying to say. Java arrays are, however, a flexible size. You do not have to give it any sort of, specific size of, number of indices that it can have. And that allows you to, add and subtract, and it will flex. So this is what you're used to with like a JavaScript array. It's pretty much that same idea, but you have to import the array list class from java.util. And then you will, if you want to declare an empty one, you just call the constructor. So at first, this syntax might look a little bit overwhelming. There's a lot of, little, different characters going on in here. So look at this one at a time. At the top of the file, of course, you're importing java.util.arraylist, and then you can use it. Let's see here. Yeah. So first of all, again, you give it the type of array list. What kind of element is it going to hold? Like, what's the data? And this needs to be that wrapper class. So string is a string, but integer, use integer instead of int, use uppercase double instead of lowercase double, etc. And then you just give it a name. And then you call the constructor to create an empty one. So you just say, new, and then array list, and then you don't actually have to reiterate what type it is at this point. It automatically takes it from where you declared it at the beginning. But you do have to have those parentheses on there because you're calling a method. You're calling the constructor method. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so some common array list methods are add. This is similar to push. It will put it on the end. Size, which is the equivalent of length. And contains, which is it's the same as, you remember last class we talked about string had contains as well, if you're looking for like a substring. It also contains for array lists, but again, what you're used to in JavaScript is includes. It's the same idea. So it's contains, and then index of is, pretty straightforward, right? But sorting, you actually need a different class in order to do sorting on an array list. So you can import this collections class, and then you can just call it from that class, collection.sort. And you know what? I want to check something because I think that might be oh, that's not what I want. I want to check and make sure it's not collections instead of collection, because again, with the, all right, here's what I want, array list methods, here we go. All right. Yeah, it's collections.sort. I'll fix that because I've got it single there. Let me go back. Yeah, but you call it collections.sort, and then you give it the name of whatever the array list is that you want to sort, and it will take care of it for you. Okay, let's come over here and do a little bit of coding. So we're going to declare an empty array list that can hold data of a type string. So I'm going to say array list, and as I do this, again, this is not currently imported, but it's suggesting it for me. So I can just do like this, and now I've got the import statement up there at the top with the tab key. And now I give it the type, so that we said that this was going to be strings. And I'm going to call it fruits. And I'm just going to say new array list, and that's it. Just declare an empty one. And now we're going to add fruits. And this is where we can make use of the add method, is what I'm trying to say. So fruits add, and I don't know, banana, sure, it's one of my favorites. And fruits dot add apple. Picking some classic fruits here, guys. Need something more exciting. How about a kiwi? That's slightly more exotic. Okay. And then we can print it, and we can actually print this directly. So we can just say, fruits, and then it'll look all pretty because it's got a nice toString method already. And then we can also print the size. So we can say fruits.size. And let me fix that. Okay, and something I didn't actually say to do here, but let's add it, is to sort it and print it again. So let's use collections and say sort and fruits, and then we'll print it again. All right, let's see what this looks like. And is it unhappy? Why is it unhappy? Interesting. Can't find, okay, did it not? Oh, it didn't, it did not automatically import when I, that's not what I meant to do. Hold on. All right. All right, now it should be happy, in theory. Oh, I've got this collection. It doesn't like the fact that it's the same name as the class. Okay. I'm going to, I'll show you guys something. If you ever want to rename a class or rename anything, you can come in here, right click on it, and then go to refactor. And it has a lot of options here. Renaming is the very first one because that's a common thing to do. But what's nice about this is IntelliJ actually goes and finds everywhere that you're using this stuff, and it updates everything for it, all the references. So you don't have to manually go through and find where you've used everything and fix it. So I can just say, rename, and I can call it collection examples, maybe, and search in comments and strings. Yeah, and refactor it. And it has renamed the class here. It's renamed the file name. So everything is updated, and now I can try this again. Maybe it'll play nice. Okay. It renamed that because it got confused, but that's okay. Yes, and now, okay. So now that it's imported correctly and it's not a conflict with my class name, good to know. I am able to actually sort it. And so now we can run it. We shouldn't have any errors. Okay, here's the output. So we get, banana, apple, kiwi, and then we get the size, which is 3. And then we sorted it, and now we have apple, banana, kiwi. So now it's nicely sorted for us. Okay, let's do this again. This time we'll do it for an empty array list that can hold data of type integer. So I'm going to say array list of type integer, use the wrapper class. We'll call it scores. And we'll say it's a new array list, and then we'll add some scores to it. So I'm going to say scores.add, and I don't know, 95. Sure. Okay, I got to get used to there we go. Different. I need to redo the key mappings for IntelliJ to what I'm used to. Okay. 91, 78, sure, 96. There's another 95. Okay, no problem. And then we'll print it. So scores, and again we can print the size, scores.size. All right, let's try this out. There we go. Okay, so I know this is small. There's the array, array list, and there's the size of 5. So that works there. And then we can do this again. Let me check how we're doing on time. All right, I'm not going to belabor the point. I'll fill this part out later. I was just going to do another one with doubles, but it's the same process, so no big deal. So now let's talk about hash maps. Okay, third type of collection, hash maps. So you're used to in JavaScript calling something an object in general, and it kind of referring to a data structure that has key value pairs. That's not kind of, we don't use object that way in Java. So a hash map is what stores key value pairs. And the term object is reserved for instances of classes. So that's kind of the difference here. If you want to instantiate something from a class, that is an object in Java. But if you want to talk about just a general data structure that holds key value pairs, it's not necessarily an instance of a class, then we're talking about a hash map. Ian, you got a question?
Yeah, I've heard the term dictionary used. Is that just the term for another term for a key value pair?
It is. I know, I'm pretty sure it's Python uses that term, and there's some, other languages that will use that. These terms get thrown around interchangeably the more you talk to polyglots, which is a fancy term that means people who know a lot of different languages. Because, you tend to kind of go toward the terminology you're used to or the one you work with the most. So yeah, if you hear dictionary, they're talking about maps or hash maps. It's the same idea. Key value pairs is the thing that it has in common.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So you have to import the HashMap class from java.util, same as you do for array list. And then you can also declare an empty one just by calling the constructor, same as you do for an array list. So as you can see, the actual methods and stuff we're about to look at are very different, but how you create a new fresh one, this is going to start to look a little bit familiar because it's very similar to the way array list is done. So you import it at the top, and then you create a new one with HashMap, and then you give it the key, the type of the key and the type of the value. So string and integer in this case. And then scores is the name. And then you call the constructor with new and HashMap without having to specify the type again. It automatically assigns it. Mina, you have a question?
Yes. You are using the constructor, right? You are calling the HashMap constructor, right? So the scores will be an object, right?
It will be a HashMap.
Sorry, I'm not getting you.
Right. So, I mean, yeah, in a very, very general sense, but it's a collection in Java, and it's specifically a hash map. So again, if we're going to use the word object with Java, we're talking about an instance of a class, and that's not what this is. It's just a general data structure.
Okay, I know. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I will try to look into that a little bit more and make sure that I'm not misrepresenting it, but that's my understanding of the distinction. Okay, so where are we? Yes, so we're going to talk about some of these methods. If you want to add a key value pair, you use put. If you want to find the value of something where you know the key, you can say get. If you want to access the entire set of entries, both key and value, use entry set. Key set gives you just the keys, values gives you just the values. And then you can actually check, does something contain a certain key or does something contain a certain value with contains key and contains value, which is super handy. And then you can take the size. How many key value pairs are there in this hash map? And then there's also the map class, separate from the hash map class. And this allows you to loop over a hash map and get all the entries by specifying the type of a single key value pair one at a time out of the whole set of entries. And this is going to make more sense when we talk about loops in a few minutes. But for now, you can just know that you just call like this map.entry and you give it the two types, and that will allow you to type a single key value pair out of a hash map. And then you can also use, once you have a variable for that, whatever that key value pair is, you can use get key, you can use get entry, and it lets you work with that within a loop. So without context, it's not going to make a lot of sense right now, but we'll do it in a minute. For now, let's go over and actually just declare a hash map and then add some things to it, just to get a little bit of practice here. So we can say hash map, and yeah, and we're going to say string and integer, and we'll call it items to pack. And this was going to get long, so I didn't put it on the slide. We'll set it equal to a new hash map and just call that constructor straight like that, and it'll create a new one. And it did correctly import it for me when I hit the tab key. Awesome. Okay, so we'll add six key value pairs. So let's do this one at a time. So we can say, items to pack dot put, and then give it, shoes, and I want to pack, 2 pairs of shoes. And then let's say socks, and I want to pack 5. It's a short trip, 5 pairs of socks. And then shirts, let's say 6 in case I spill something on it. And pants, I can get away with 2 or 3. Let's go with 3. And then I don't know, a jacket, jackets, and we'll just do 1. And let's say, belts, and again, I just did 1. Okay. Then we can print this. So let's do that and print items to pack. Let's just stop right there. Okay, now this is interesting. So when this prints out, you can see that it presents it in curly braces, much like you expect, kind of an object with key value pairs to be, and it uses equal signs to relate the key value pairs. So you can see pants equals 3, shirts equals 6, socks, and they're separated by commas. So this is kind of what you see when you just ask it to print it for you so that you can see everything. Let's print the entry set for this now. So we'll say items, I got to print it. So, okay, there we go. Items to pack dot entry set. And let's take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so it looks really similar, except it actually presents it with brackets instead of curly braces. And if we want to print just the key set, we actually get items to pack key set. And let's go ahead and do the values too. Items to pack dot and no values. And these are methods. So, always putting the parentheses on there. But IntelliJ is pretty cool about, suggesting it. So it lets you kind of tab into it. Yeah, so we can kind of see here, now we have a list that has just the keys, and we have a list that has just the values. And now we can check if we have a certain key. So let's say, let's print items to pack contains key, and we'll look for, socks. And on this one, which these are numbers, so I don't know how useful it is, but I'll do it as an example anyway, contains value 5, or no, let's go with 7. So it's something that's would return false. Okay, yeah, so contains key socks returns true, and contains value 7 returns false. And then we can print the size to see how many key value pairs does this thing have anyway. Items pack dot size. Okay, and we get a size of 6, which is exactly how many things we put into it. All right, we got to move on because we still have to do conditionals and loops. So let's keep going. Conditionals, essentially, the main thing that's different about all of this, all I really need to say about equality is that JavaScript uses triple equals for strict equality, and there's no such thing in Java. So you just use double equals and not equals. So you can see the comparison operators down here. This is pretty much what you're used to with but just use the double equals and not equal. And then the logical operators are the same. So double ampersand for and, double pipe for or, and bang for not. Okay. And then conditionals, not a whole lot to say about if, and else, because this is exactly the same as JavaScript. So you already know how to do this. I don't really need to spend any time on it. But we have an example here of, checking, for temperatures, if it's greater than 99.5, say the patient's temperature is too high, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for the sake of time, I'm going to move on. Switch statements. So this also exists in JavaScript. We just don't really talk about it. So I'm going to kind of talk about it for a second. The idea is that it uses cases to check the values of a variable, compares, what's this variable, and depending on, what's the value of the variable? And depending on what it is, I'm going to do something different. And then at the very end, you can have a default case that runs if there are no matches to the cases above. And this break keyword that you see in here for each of the specific cases, all it does is exit the entire switch block. And then it can just continue with any code that is below that. And if you leave that out, this is called fall through, where the default case is still going to run because you didn't exit out, So you have to, I can't even off the top of my head think of an example of when you would want that. But that's what happens. So if you are ever wondering why, if you run one of these and you get a specific match on a case, but then you also get the default, it's probably because you forgot to put break in there. So just keep that in mind. So again, you'll probably use if else statements most of the time. Every once in a while, these are useful. Depending on what you're doing, it can be a little cleaner sometimes. But yeah, you declare the switch block with switch. Say which variable it is that you're checking, and then for each one of these cases, use the case keyword and default for no other matches, and then you actually just check those values. And then there's those break keywords that will exit the switch block entirely. Okay. I was going to live code that, but I think I'm going to focus on loops. So let's talk about loops. For loop is very straightforward. This is pretty much what you're used to. The exception is that with JavaScript, you were using the let keyword to establish that local variable, like I is typically the one we use, right, for an index. But of course, this is Java, so you have to type it. So instead, we're giving it a type, in this case, int for an integer. And you just have to put that in there, and everything else is pretty much the same as JavaScript, though. So that's very straightforward. We can just, in this example, print each one of those numbers from 1 to 10, as long as we declare that variable I with a type int. Okay, now here's what's new for each loop. This is really perfect for iterating through collections of data because you don't have to worry about an index specifically. You just declare the type of the local variable, and then you are going to, and that represents, one single element from the collection. And then use a colon to separate the local variable from the name of the collection. And then, yeah, so you can see here that I've got this array of words, and then I've said, I want to look at each word at a time. So I'm going to say it's each word is a string. So I give it the type string and give it a name. In this case, I've just chosen word of words, right? I want to look at one word at a time out of all of the words that are in the array. And then, that's the array name there. So this is very straightforward for things like array and array lists. Where it gets a little trickier is when you're talking about hash maps. And so what I want to do is kind of go over to here, and let's see, conditional. I'm going to skip this for now because we're running out of time, but let's do this. So construct a for each loop. Yeah. So we can do this again, just for the sake of going through this again. This is the example that's on the slide. So we're going to say for, and then int I. I'm sorry, this is for each. Silly me. Okay, string word of words. And then I can say, I want to print, the word. And then I can run this. Oh, I'm not running the right thing. Hold on. Run loops. There we go. I am learning Java one at a time. It just went through and took each one and printed it. But when we do this for a hash map, this is where it gets super interesting. I've created a hash map here. You can see it's, the values are strings, and I'm calling it postcards, and it's representing a certain type of, group of postcards that I have. So the collection is called the night sky, and the amount is 50, and the theme is space, and it's got all this really cool, old space photos and stuff and diagrams from NASA. Super cool stuff. And so we want to kind of, loop through each of these, and looping through the keys and looping through the values is fairly straightforward as long as you remember the methods that you have to use for HashMap, right? So we can say, for, and this is going to be a for each. And we'll say, string, and we can just say, key, if we want to, and just say, of postcards dot key set. So it's going to go and it's going to create a list of all of the keys, and that's what we're actually iterating through. And we're going to look at it a key at a time. And when we do this, excuse me, we are going to, and we can just print the key straight out. So let's run this again. So we get amount, theme, collection, prints them one at a time. Similarly, we can go through the values, which these are, and I'll just use val for value, and we'll say, postcards.values, and go through those and print the value. Okay, very similar. Okay, So the important thing to remember there is that you have to actually access the list of keys or the list of values if you want to do it that way. And then you just remember that you have to apply a type to this local variable that stands in for each of the keys or each of the values, right? And then it's just a regular for each loop because you're really just, looping through a list. Matt, you have a question, Matthew?
Is there a reason that it printed in that order?
Because you didn't see this as much as JavaScript, because key value pairs are not stored by any sort of index. And so there's never any guarantee that you're going to get them in a particular order, the way that they're stored in memory. Yeah, if you're interested in order, then like you probably would have to, find some way to sort this as you pull it out. Or something. I mean, I guess it would depend on what's important to you. But yeah, that's the way key value, set maps work. They're not stored by index, they're just stored by key. Okay, so here's the complicated part. We're going to do a for each, and we want to do it on all the keys and value pairs. So I actually am going to see, no, we can do this. Okay. Let's go back just for your reference. Let's go back to the slide. Let me find it. Nope. That's definitely not where I wanted to go. Here we go. Let's go back to the list of methods here, because you remember I said here that we may need to use this map class in order to give a type to a single key value pair. So this is exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to import the map class. So now I've got this up here, import java.util.map. And I'm going to say entry, which is a special way to tap into this and give them a type. So in this case, we know we have string and string, right? So now I have a type for what I want to represent. And I'm just going to call it, entry, and then say that it is let's see, where I gotta get the name, postcards, haha. Postcards, and get the entry set. And that way it can look at them one at a time. And then we can, print something like the key is and concatenate that with entry.getKey. And then I can do something similar with value and say that the value is entry.getValue. And then it takes from this pair, this entry, and allows us to access the two, whichever one of the two it is that we want. So let's give this a try. Make sure I did this right. Yep, there we go. So the key is amount, the value is 50. The key is theme, the value is space. The key is collection, the value is the night sky. So, it gets a little bit more complicated when you want to access both of them. But as long as you remember that you can make use of this map class with this map.entry to give the key value pair a type, that's all you need, because every for each loop just has to have a type on this local variable, and then you can go from there. Does anybody have any questions about this? It's actually outlined really well in your book, because they give some good examples. So if you want to reference additional examples, you can start with your book, but I'm sure you can find lots of resources online too that can get into this a little more. But there are times when you're working with data in Java where this is exactly kind of the thing that you need. Okay, so let's talk about the last couple types of loops, and then we're going to move on to Studio. And I have to switch back to, all right. We went through for loop, we went through for each loop. Okay, while loop. We did a little bit of this last week in the studio, but let's just talk about it for a second. So essentially, the syntax is identical to JavaScript for a regular while loop, actually for both of them. So, you know, this example, I'm going through this, you know, array of numbers, and I'm just going to loop through and say, I want to print them as long as they are still less than 100, and they're in increasing order. So it's going to eventually get to a number 106 that is higher, you know, it's 100 or bigger. So we would expect that it would stop at that point and no longer be printing them out. So let's give this a go. Can do exactly, I need to set an index so that we can actually, and I just realized in this example, I have failed to increase the index. So we'll make sure to take care of that in the code here. I'll fix it on the slide later. We're gonna set an index of 0, and we'll say while numbers at index is less than 100, print numbers at index. And then we do need to actually increase the index by 1. So let's give that a go. Okay, so we get 2, 14, 33, 57, all the way up to 94, and then it stops as expected, and we don't have these last 3 because they are 100 or greater. Okay, so that's all there is to that. The do while loop is a little more confusing, and this does also exist in JavaScript. We didn't talk about it, but it does. So just don't forget, oh, wow. I forgot that I don't have, let me go back to that. I don't have the example on here because it's too big. So we're just gonna look at the code. But the syntax is identical to JavaScript. Just don't forget you have to have a semicolon after the while expression. So let's do this. We're going to ask a user for movie titles until they enter quit. So we can, it gives us a hint here. We want to use next line to handle multi-word strings. So if you have spaces in there, so it doesn't split them up automatically. So the first thing we need to do is create a scanner. And so we're going to have scanner input equals new scanner, system.in. And now we have this. So we can say do, and then we'll have the code we want to run at least once. That's the idea here. And then we'll have, you know, it check at that point, should I continue going back and loop again? And then of course I said, you know, put a semicolon on there. And our condition here is going to be if they entered quit. And so we actually need a variable to represent the title we're asking for. So I'm just going to have, you know, string title. I'm not going to give it a value. I'm just going to declare it. And then inside here, we can say, you know, please enter a movie title or quit. And go ahead and let that print to the console. And then we can accept the input and say title equals input dot next line. And again, that next line will make sure that it collects anything they put as a single string, which is different than just using next. Because then it'll treat them as individual words. And then we can kind of say, you know, okay, so initially we'd want to just say while, you know, not title equals, which we're using for comparing strings, quit. And I actually could, if we want to have kind of, you know, if you guys remember this from the JavaScript unit, it's better to kind of say like, you know, 2 lowercase or, you know, 2 uppercase, 2 lowercase, however you want to do it, but just take whatever they give you and make it where, you know, case sensitivity is no longer an issue. And then just check if it's equals to quit. And then if it isn't, it'll loop back around and ask him for another one. But then the other instruction we have here is that we want to actually have a collection and add the title to the collection as we go. So, and then we'll print it at the very end. So here's something that, you know, we have to consider. What type of collection would we use? And you guys can answer me on this. What's the best type of collection to use for something like this?
Array list,
Yes, why?
because it is you're going to enter one title per line. So there will not be a key value pairs. So you cannot use HashMap. So
Right.
better use the array list. And there is no fixed size
Right.
the user entry.
Right. Yep, exactly. We don't know how many things are going to need to fit in here. So we don't want to set aside. So we're not going to use array. We're going to use array list. Absolutely. Okay, so I will then need to typing and nothing is happening. There we go. So I'm going to import that up at the top. Yes. And then I'm going to say it's an array of strings, an array list of strings rather. And then we'll say, movie titles. How's that? And then new array list. And it's empty to start with, which is exactly what we expect. And then we will say if not title to lowercase equals and then quit, because we don't want to actually put quit in there, right? So we have to check for that. So as long as it's not quit, we want movie titles dot add, and then we'll add that title to it. And then at the very end, after they say quit and we exit, that's where we're going to print the list, the array list. So we'll just say print movie titles. So let's see what happens when we run this. Okay, please enter a movie title or quit. One of my favorites, Gosford Park. Somebody give me a title.
Spirited Away.
Okay, what's another one?
Monty Python.
Monty Python?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quest for the Holy Grail is what I was thinking, but
Yeah. No, we can go with that. Okay, that's cool. And then I'll just say quit. And then it prints them. 3 movies, comma separated in list format. So there you go. That's a great use for a do while loop, because you wanted at least one thing, but you weren't sure how many more you needed. And so you give them a chance to, exit out of it with user input. Okay, so that is all the time we have. We're actually over time. So I'm going to go ahead and get you going on your studio. I will make sure that you have the solution to all the stuff I didn't end up live coding in the code as well. And I'll push that to the repo. You guys can fork it later if you'd like. So for tonight's studio, you're going to create a new package in your Java Web Dev Exercises project that you have previously forked. And you're going to use your new knowledge of loops and collections to count characters from a movie quote and print the results. You may need to refer to your book on some things. You definitely can follow the instructions in here. So let's take a look at those. I'll go back to that. It's where it used to be. Studio, here we go. Okay, so they give you this quote from the movie Hidden Figures. And they remind you, this is the part I was referring to, that you can create an array of characters using this by taking a string and using this special method to char array. So pay attention to that, you'll need that. And then you have a nice collection of characters that you can iterate through. And what you're going to need to do is create some sort of data structure that allows you to keep count of all of the individual counts of how many times did this particular character show up. And when you're done, you can go through and print those one at a time, one per line. And then there are some bonus missions, using user input to enter a different string instead of using a hard-coded one, making the character counts case insensitive, excluding non-alphabetic characters. So there's things you can kind of add to your code and tweak it and finesse it however you would like. The super bonus is reading the string in from a file. And this is super challenging, so don't feel bad if you don't get to it. We may not even have time for it tonight when we do the studio review. So we'll see. But I will go over that. We'll come back here at, let's say 8:05. So just as a reminder, we've got class on Thursday, and then there's no class next week, catch-up class on Thursday of next week. Yeah, Monday, I should have said. And then when we come back on class 4, that's when your graded assignment 1 is due, and we will finish talking about classes in Java. We're going to spend a couple of different classes talking about classes. That's not confusing. Okay, so that is all I've got for you. You guys head off to Studio.